Welcome. Close your eyes. Take a slow breath in and let the day unclench from your shoulders. Tonight, the kitchen is already awake for you. A low fire, thinking in orange, rafters perfumed with years of smoke, barrels in the corner remembering waves they haven't seen in decades. We're slipping into Elizabethan England by the quiet door. Not the jeweled banquets where peacocks wear their own feathers back to the table, but the everyday rooms where soup forgives your mistakes, where fresh means recently unsalted, and almost everything tastes a little like yesterday's sea. If you enjoy these sleepy, slightly ridiculous journeys through history, please tap like. It truly helps us keep the hearth warm. And in the comments, tell us where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a joy to see this little tavern of ours lit up around the world. If you never want to miss another night in the past, subscribe and ring the bell like a church chime over a quiet market. Tonight, we'll wander slowly through the flavors that shaped a kingdom. Salt, smoke, and brine, the Tudor flavor triangle. Barrels that whisper like old boats in dry rooms. Fish that sailed here as stiff planks and learned to be stews. Butter that did its best and, honestly, didn't deserve July. We'll start where the taste begins. Preservation. A herring fleet glinting in gray morning. Stockfish you must persuade with a mallet before it remembers being food. A market where the loudest vendor isn't the man with onions. It's the barrel hoops singing quietly as wood swells and releases yesterday's tide. You'll feel the pull of fish stays, bells turning ordinary meals into religion, eel baskets blinking politely from riverbanks, lamprey pies at court that look like triumph and smell like a harbor trying to behave. We'll climb into the smokehouse next, where bacon becomes winterproof and everything tastes faintly of chimney. Rafter food, soot sweet and quietly proud. The beams black with stories that never learn to stop. Then we'll walk the market where fresh means brave. Cheapside chatter, cartwheels, bruised greens with excellent intentions. A fish that has traveled farther than most people ever will, and a stallholder who swears it smiled at him at dawn, which might be true. We'll share a bowl that never quite fills. Meat for the few, offal for the many. A butcher's quiet kindness slipping a marrow bone into your bag. The way onions can turn a poor pot into a warm apology. We'll break bread that crunches with more than crust. Coarse loaves that remember the millstone. Fine manchet that remembers somebody's status. Crumbs like small comforts. Crust like a helpful shield. We'll pick herbs from hedgerow hope. Parsley to green the morale. Sage with opinions. Rosemary that can perfume a bad day into an almost good one. Pother herbs that insist tomorrow will exist whether it's ready or not. We'll listen to dairy breathe. Butter with a springtime accent. Cheeses that turn into time capsules when the weather forgets manners. A July when everything goes a little lively and the cellar pretends not to notice. We'll borrow sweetness from people who can afford to gild it. Confits like tiny planets. Marchpan pretending to be architecture. Spices that travel farther than news, and sugar that smiles with bad intentions toward teeth. We'll sit at the long table where theater eats dinner. Banquets that glitter and whisper, "Look at me," in 6 languages. Peacocks, cranes, and little pastry castles that collapse politely. And then we'll go home to a bowl that actually gets eaten. We'll glance at laws and Lent. assizes, guilds, and fish days that make calendars into recipes. A poacher's quiet footstep and the way a rabbit can sound like a decision. The moment bread becomes evidence and supper becomes a negotiation. We'll pause at a street stall where comfort is portable. Hot pies that don't ask questions. Oysters cheaper than water and twice as enthusiastic. A tavern stew that tastes like 7 yesterdays and somehow heals the 8th. We'll acknowledge the risks no one had words for. A barrel gone wrong, a fat gone loud, a rye with strange ideas. The rituals people trust, boiling, beer, vinegar, sniffing, prayer. The way a careful nose can be a superstition that works. And then we'll peek into rooms with gold on the table. Courtiers pretending their tongues aren't tired of brine. Lamprey crowned like a king who never abdicates. Spice singing over the harbor note that never quite leaves. Through all of it, we'll move slowly, letting each room warm the next, like passing a ladle from hand to hand without spilling the night. If your eyes get heavy while we talk about barrels and bells, that's not just allowed, it's recommended. Let the sounds of brine, fire, and quiet wooden lids carry you toward sleep, one gentle spoon at a time. Now, settle in beneath your blanket. Listen for the soft creak of a kitchen beam that's seen 100 winters, and let the harbor drift through the room, polite and a little proud. Welcome to Elizabethan Food Was Disgusting, Why Everything Tasted Like Yesterday's Sea. Enjoy the story and sleep like bread cooling on a silent windowsill.
In the quiet corner of the kitchen sits a small empire, circular, iron-belted, patient. It rules without speeches. It rules with creaks. It rules with crystals. This is the barrel, and its sovereign, unyielding, indispensable, slightly rude, is salt. Salt does not flirt like herbs or sing like smoke. It dictates. It tells water to leave. It tells meat to wait. It tells small, invisible troublemakers that dinner is closed to them forever. Salt is the weather you can carry indoors, a dry season packed into wooden hoops. Open the salt box, and every sound lowers its voice. The ladle leans closer, the kettle listens, even onions remember their manners. You pinch a few grains, and they vanish into your skin, the way obligations do. At the salting bench, autumn becomes February. The table is a battlefield of old victories. Grooves, knife scratches, stains that never learned to apologize. You rub crystals into pork with the seriousness of a promise. Skin tightens, flesh gains dignity. You stack slabs in layers, meat, salt, until the trough looks like geology. By morning, brine has appeared as if from nowhere. The tyrant pulling water from flesh the way facts pull truth from rumor. You pour the new liquid into the barrel. The staves swell, the hoops approve. Somewhere far away, the sea feels a tiny piece of itself come home. Salt's power is blunt and honest. Water out, time in. Spoiling, nowhere. A slab of salt beef thuds on the table like proof. You soak it once. The water smells like the sea misbehaving. Twice, the sea remembers its manners. Thrice, the meat remembers childhood. Then you hang it near the hearth and let smoke murmur over it. Salt makes forever possible. Smoke makes forever pleasant. Together, they turn anxiety into supper. When the beef finally relaxes into broth, you taste law. Not ink law, iron law. Preservation written in a spoon. A child licks a finger, winces, and asks, "Why is it salty?" Because salt collects taxes with interest. Because it refuses to be ignored. because even after soaking and boiling, a faint crown remains on the tongue. Because you must undo the success you begged it to achieve. Because it's so certain it is right that it often is. Walk the market and hear salt discussed without its name. The fishmonger mutters that a barrel walked a little. Brine leaked, fish arrived thirsty. He hammers a hoop back into virtue and adds more salt with the practiced forgiveness of a man who forgives nothing. The dairy woman says her July butter needs a stern word, then salts and beats it until it remembers decorum. The brewer praises a cask with character, meaning it remembers ale, cider, voyage, cooper, and salt all at once. The cooper's yard smells like tree and river and decisions. He sings while he bends staves into circles because the song convinces his hands to remember what his father taught them. Brine is made like peace, slowly, with precedent. Warm, clean water until it thinks about kindness. Stir in salt until an egg floats and offers an opinion. Pour over meat stacked with an engineer's dignity. Lay a weighted board on top, the board with your uncle's scar. Listen for the tiny fizz of brine finding corners and evicting bubbles. Seal, trust. You have placed a problem where solutions live. Calendars ring with bells. No meat, says iron from the tower. Very well, answers salt. Herring fleets swell. Cod dries into sermons. Eels coil like punctuation. Barrels deepen. Even at long tables where lamprey wears pastry crowns and spices travel farther than news, the harbor note remains. Gild the dish, salt still signs the page. The richest tongues tire of brine, but they obey it. Status can decorate flavor. It cannot erase the barrel. Sometimes the empire fails. The stave splits with old knee logic. A hoop loosens like a belt after feast. Brine creeps out to find the sea. Fat goes lively under a bad-tempered sun. Then come the elections of the hand. Cut here, boil with vinegar and hope, save what can be saved. Tell the chickens the rest is a story. Scald the barrel with fury and ash, begin again. Dinner is not optional. The price of flavor? Coin, certainly. Salt is guarded, taxed, bargained, but also wood for boiling, space for barrels, time for soaking, patience for testing, faith for February. You don't preserve for a week, you preserve for a month you can't see yet. Every winter bowl taste of a past self, sending comfort forward. There is a ledger no one writes and everyone feels. Salt spent, wrists burning at the bench, salt saved, January meat pulled from brine and the room applauding very quietly. Salt scolded, a dinner that tasted like law with no laughter. Salt praised, a child eating without complaint, sleeping like a loaf on a windowsill. Step into the cooper's light. He runs a hand along a stave and calls it by name, oak, but also promise. He planed the belly until wood agrees to pretend it is a circle. He steams, bends, and belts it with iron. He cuts the crows, a groove like a memory where the head will sit. When the last hoop is driven and the barrel tightens its belt, something inside you loosens. Containers are calming. They say later on your behalf. In the fish sheds by the river, barrels hum like beehives. Herring flash like coins. Stockfish stand like sermons. If you press your ear to a cask, pretending to think, you hear brine talking to wood, small, steady, house noise. The sea lives here now. On the quay, a man breaks rock salt with mountain hands and swears it's best for pigs. The fishmonger tells him to brine a stone and report back. These arguments are ritual. They cure mornings. At home, you salt like breathing. Over the shoulder if it spills. Blind the devil. Don't argue. Tap a soaky hoop with polite violence. Scrub a stained barrel with scald and ash until the wood stops telling stories you don't want to hear. Let it dry where the draft knows your name. Put your hand inside and feel the cool. Readiness. You are building a small year. Now taste the stew. Beneath onion forgiveness and parsley morale, the tyrant afterimage remains, a harbor note under hearth song, not a shout, a mark. This bowl was kept, this meat waited. This is proof last autumn loved you. The spoon returns as if it knows its route. The bread, crust like armor, crumb like apology, sweeps the bottom and turns history into comfort. A child asks again, why is it salty? You say what your elders said before the word Elizabethan existed. Because salt kept us. Because it said later when we were busy being now. Because it is a tyrant that protects. Because sometimes the price of flavor is the proof that we will be here to taste it. Close the salt box gently. Lay a hand on the barrel head the way you'd lay it on a friend's shoulder when words are unnecessary. The empire breathes. The kitchen approves. In a moment, we'll step from the tyrant's court into its chapel, the smokehouse, where soot learned sweetness and rafters learned to sing. For now, let the brine's hush live on your tongue a breath longer. Let the price of flavor feel like a blessing that took work. Let the barrel keep the calendar while you keep the spoon.
You wake to a kitchen that speaks in low tide. The fire is thinking, not flaming. Orange breath, slow decisions. Above it, rafters have learned the color of smoke, that serious velvet black that turns a ceiling into a winter night, even at noon. If you touch a beam, a century comes away on your fingertips. Soot, salt, bacon memory, a little sweetness from a ham that survived a February and became a story. Behind you, a barrel creaks, not a complaint, more like a boat remembering. Wood swells, iron belts clear their throats, and the staves decide to be a circle for one more day. In the corner, another barrel fidgets and settles, as if rain had sent a letter promising to visit. None of these barrels has seen the ocean in years. The ocean, however, still lives in them. On the table, a bowl waits with that patient, round optimism bulls are born with. Inside is yesterday turning into today, stockfish that arrived stiff as a plank and has finally agreed to be soup, onions apologizing for everything, a turnip with average talent but excellent morale, parsley chopped small, the size of hope. You inhale and your mouth fills with a familiar guest, harbor. Not a wave, a residue. Rope that didn't quite dry, tar's black whisper, iron that rusted at a sermon, a fish that traveled farther than anyone you know and learned the language of brine along the way. People talk about flavor like it is a painter's choice. In Elizabethan England, flavor is engineering. It is logistics. It is the arithmetic of survival. Salt and wood and time making an answer where a winter asked a hard question. The sea is in your supper not because you live by it, but because you owe it your life. Fish tells the truth quickly. Herring arrives like a hymn. It travels in congregations, in silvery verses, in barrels that hum. The bell turns Friday into a fish day, and half the town becomes practical theologians. Herring fillets pack themselves in salt, spine to belly, glitter to glitter, a tight geometry of calories and compliance. By the time you lift the lid at home, it smells like a harbor doing its best to behave. Your tongue will understand the law even before your ears hear it again from the tower. Stockfish is different. Cod that forgot it was a fish and became a board. You do not cook stockfish, you reconcile with it. You soak, you beat it wrapped in cloth, you soak again. You talk to it in the kindly voice used for stubborn tools. At last, it sighs into the pot and makes peace with water, and your kitchen smells like the sea telling a story to a river. Eel belongs to the inland faithful. It coils in baskets like punctuation, commas for fasting days, exclamation marks for a wedding eavesdropped by Lent. Eel tastes of riverbank and patience, but on your tongue,
River and ocean shake hands in salt. That handshake is the background music of the age. Lamprey is a court jest in pastry. Even there, under spices, sugar, and confidence, the harbor note holds office. A golden crust crowns it. The sea is not hiding. It is bowing, and no one has the courage to ask it to leave. But fish alone doesn't put the tide on your tongue. Barrels do. Brine does. Roads do. Walk to the storeroom. It is a cool little cathedral of circles and silence. Barrels sit with the humility of heavy things. Tap a hoop. Hear the dull, reliable note of iron that has done its job for years without drama. Run a palm over a stave. Feel the grain that learned water and kept the accent. Barrels are time machines. They take October and deliver it to February without losing the plot. Open one. The brine breathes, blunt, clean, honest. Not pretty, not cruel, competent. Inside is meat that has learned that waiting is a virtue. Salt crystals frost the fat like a light winter that refused to leave at dawn. You lift a slab, and it thuds like a promise on the table. This is why dinner tastes like harbor, because your food lived in a small sea before it became your supper. Salt is the quiet tyrant. It doesn't plead like herbs or perform like spice. It orders water to leave. It tells small, invisible saboteurs that this house is closed. It makes a season inside wood, and then in a kind of domestic irony, you spend the afternoon asking the tyrant to let go, soaking, boiling, soaking again, until the meat's ocean passport is stamped visitor instead of resident. Even then, the sea leaves its signature, a faint crown on your tongue. You rinse. You boil. The first water smells like a tide that forgot its manners. The second smells like a beach with better company. The third starts to sound like an argument ending well. Hang the beef for a while near the hearth, and smoke comes to mediate. Smoke is the kind monarch. It persuades instead of commands. It turns preservation into flavor and rafters into history. When salt and smoke share a sentence, your tongue reads safe before it reads good, and then realizes the two can be the same word. Step outside. The market is persuading the day to spend itself. You are not near the sea. You do not have to be. Fish stalls leak brine into the cobbles, and the cobbles learn to shine like scales. The fishmonger has river eyes and sea hands. He can hear when a barrel wants more salt. He can see when a herring school has told the truth to a boat. He wraps a hoop, listens to the wood's vowel, and declares the future edible. The bread woman stacks loaves with crusts like armor and crumbs like apologies. A manchet, white, bolted, soft as status, whispers court in wheat. Brown maslin loaves speak the regional dialect of survival. If you hold a loaf to your ear, you will hear wind in grain, stone on kernel, fire in patience, and a bit of salt, the tyrant's hand in a minor role. At the herb stall, hope is green and chopped small. Parsley is morale. Sage is policy. Rosemary is memory that refuses to be quiet. Thyme hides in everything, the countryside's rumor. These do not banish the sea. They teach it table manners. Back home, the pot fogs your face with harbor learning to be house. Steam carries yesterday's tide and today's onion into an agreement. You do not aim for novelty. You aim for warmth. When new is rare, warm becomes a flavor all its own. Fish days make the calendar taste like the sea. Bells change recipes. Demand moves in fleets and barrels. The ocean travels inland in hoops and hymns. Even those who dine under tapestries cannot escape the barrel's accent. Gild the pie, name the spice, parade the pastry. Beneath the trumpet, the harbor still hums in the key of salt. Sometimes the sea speaks too loudly. A barrel fails, stave with old knee logic, hoop with feast day looseness, and brine sulks out to find weather. Fat goes lively under a July with poor self-control. The elder, with smoke under her skin, arrives, taps a hoop back into virtue, scrubs a cask with ash and scald, and tells you which piece is supper and which piece is a cautionary tale for chickens. You learn there are days when the harbor must be argued with, gently, firmly, with vinegar and hope. The price of this flavor? Coin, certainly. Salt is taxed, hoarded, rationed by hands that know the weight of a handful without scales. But also wood for boiling, space for barrels and rooms that needed that corner, time for soaking, wrists for rubbing crystals into skin, faith for February. Preservation is a letter your past self writes to your future self and signs with salt. Most winter stews taste like love with a brine aftertaste. Sit and eat. Spoon, bowl, breath. Beneath onion forgiveness and parsley morale, there it is, the harbor's after-image. Not a wave.
The bell does not ask. It decides. A single iron voice climbs the morning and pushes its thumb onto the day. Whatever else was planned shifts slightly to make room for obedience. In Elizabethan England, bells don't just measure hours, they measure hunger, and they legislate flavor. Friday has arrived, and with it, the old agreement between church, river, sea, and kitchen. Today, you will eat fish. You don't argue with the tower, not when the tower has friends. Parish registers, market inspectors, neighbors with opinions, and a conscience that learned Latin before it learned mercy. So the street wakes a little earlier. Barrels tilt their round shoulders into place, nets shrug river water out of their knots, and markets unfold like sails. Fish days, plural, not only Fridays. Vigils before feast days, Lent stretching like a long shadow from winter into spring. Ember days that sound like weather but mean rules. In practice, it feels like the week has more water in it than land. The calendar doesn't just tell you when to rest, it tells you what to taste. Religion writes the menu in ink. Rivers and seas write it in brine. Down by the quay or inland along a damp ribbon of river where reeds gossip, business opens with a yawn. Eel baskets blink politely. No one ever saw an eel hurry. Herring arrive in ranks, silver opinions stacked spine to belly in casks that hum with salt. A boy turns the key in a barrel, that small wooden bung that looks boring and is actually power, and the brine breathes like a cellar exhaling news. Your purse is in full, but fortunately fish days speak many dialects of affordability. Eels are local diplomacy. You buy 2, pretending you meant to buy 3, and the seller pretends he forgot you said 2 and wraps 3 anyway because your aunt once brought him soup when his wife was in childbed. Herring are the civil service, everywhere cooperative, slightly briny in conversation. Stockfish is the visiting dignitary, stiff, formal, requiring ceremony and mallet. You carry your choices home the way one carries a story, carefully, aware that it will change a little once it's told. In the kitchen, the river finds the hearth. A pot decides to be helpful. Here is the choreography of a fish day for most people. You soak. Always there is soaking. Water learns to be brine and then learns to be pity. Stockfish changes its mind about being wood. Herring remember they were once music and agreed to be lunch. Eels pretend not to notice the knife and then forgive you once they meet the pan. You chop the something green, parsley, always ready to improve morale. Sage if someone elder is watching. Dill if the river whispered a secret and you want to see whether it pairs well with onion apology. Vinegar stands by, like a sharp friend who speaks only when necessary. You consider bread, coarse loaves, crust like armor, crumb like compromise. You slice thick, more raft than slice, because fish on Friday likes to be ferried to the mouth with dignity. If you are lucky, or titled, or miraculously both, there is manchet, white,
bolted, soft as a secret, but even it knows to be quiet under fish. And then you cook slowly, because fish days are loud enough without you adding haste. A stew that tastes like agreement. River plus herb plus onion plus the calendar's idea of virtue. Not everyone eats the same river. Rank begins at the table and proceeds to flavor. The poor have fish that forgive. Herring, eel, and whatever the river offered without being asked. They eat fish in bowls that have already known 10 other dinners this month. The taste is blunt and honest, brine loosening into broth, smoke from a hearth beam that doesn't know it is beautiful, onion doing the good work that never gets applause. Artisans and merchants sit a little higher, not on their chairs necessarily, but in their choices. They can buy fresh if the fishmongers like them and the weather remembered manners. They can afford a spice or two that came to town wrapped in stories. Their eel stews are brighter, their pies small, portable, wrapped in a crust that tries to be a castle, carry fish days comfortably through afternoons. Gentry and nobility eat the river staged by the theater. Fish obey bells and costumes, lamprey crowned in pastry, pike that appears and vanishes in almond and starch, sturgeon arriving under a sauce with more passport stamps than a sailor. Court fasting is a performance. The harbor note never disappears. Salt always signs its work, but it can be gilded until it whispers. One truth doesn't change with rank. Obedience flavors everyone's dinner. The enforcement, like most things in Tudor life, blends ritual, bureaucracy, and a gesture toward grace. Inspectors visit markets not because they enjoy fish, some do, some don't, but because someone must ensure the bell's voice is not ignored just outside its hearing. Tavern keepers are reminded, once, kindly, thereafter, memorably, that menus have liturgical seasons. A neighbor will quietly mention that meat stew simmering on a Friday smells like confession in advance. And people, mostly, comply, not only because of fear, but because habit is a soft law that keeps you warm. Lent deserves its own paragraph. It is the long conversation between winter's hunger and spring's promise. When ice has had too much to say and green things are still timid, Lent arrives and says, "We will eat differently together." You eat fish not because meat is evil, but because discipline tastes like hope when there isn't much else to taste. Rivers and barrels carry communities across a lean time, one ladle at a time. You can call it piety, you can call it logistics. The stew doesn't care what you call it, so long as you share. There is kindness in this insistence. Fish on Fridays means the river has customers, which means fishermen have coin, which means boats get repaired, which means barrels get bought, which means coopers sing while they hammer, which means salt moves from pan to packet to cask to kitchen, which means the economy hums in the key of brine. Bells keep commerce honest, commerce keeps bells fed. A town that obeys together will also, this is very human, eat together more often. On fish days, neighbors talk about fish. They swap a handful of parsley. They exchange a theory about eels. They tend without planning to each other. There are, of course, the necessary cheats, the allowable fudges that show the law understands the difference between sin and soup. Dry fish becomes wet with a spoon of butter because the child is thin. The eel pie wears a lid as thick as a sermon so that no one notices the small, guilty hint of bacon underneath, included because someone elderly insisted it prevented swampy humors. A poor family glances towards heaven and, finding God's face in the neighbor's face instead, accepts a ladle of meat stew from Wednesday reheated on a Friday because fuel is dear and the bell, though commanding, is not cruel. Even these cheats taste of fish days. The structure shapes the exceptions. Let's go walking, because fish days are best understood with your feet. At the river, the morning is the color of pewter polished with cloud. Reeds gossip and whisper voices. A heron performs the slowest possible thought. The fisherman's hands have the grammar of rope. He tilts his head as if listening to current and sells you an eel with the same movement as a blessing. You ask for 2. He counts 3. You start to argue. He shrugs. Lent, he says, as if the word were a reason to be a little more generous than usual. Perhaps it is.
On the quay, a barrel argues with humidity and loses. The cooper appears, taps a hoop with confident rudeness, and the wood changes its mind. Salt is poured into a wound. The wound heals. The fish inside continue to wait, which is their best trick. In the market, the fishmonger lifts a herring by the gill as if revealing a clue. He swears the school saying this morning, "You do not ask for proof." Not every hymn is for every ear. In a kitchen you pass on your way home, a stew tells the house it will be fine. You can tell by the way people move around it, moving more slowly, bumping into each other less, finding the spoon without looking. Back at your table, you lay out your obedience. Bread. Thick. Ordinary. Trustworthy. The kind of slice that refuses to break under fish. A small pot of something sharp, vinegar warmed with pepper, the poor man's sauce, and the favorite sauce of sensible people. The stew, greened with a handful of morale. The eel, immodest and delicious, pretending it is complicated when it is actually generous. The herring, repentant after so much salt, forgiven by onions and thyme. You eat. You taste river and rule in the same spoon. You taste barrel and bell. You taste the long human talent for turning a constraint into a cuisine. Children negotiate the rules like philosophers. If I pick out the fish and eat just the broth, does it count? If I'm sick, is bacon medicinal? If the cat steals the eel, am I responsible for her soul? The answers are gentle. A little laughter, a shared superstition about salt spilled over shoulders, a story about a saint who liked herring more than holiness, told badly but with gusto. Rank enters again in dessert. The poor lick spoons clean and call fruit next month. Merchants slice a quince that tasted rough until it learned to be jam. The gentry produce marchpane, almond sugar illusions shaped like fish, which is either very pious or very funny depending on the bite. Sugar smiles with bad intentions towards teeth. No one cares for 1 hour. Evening.
The smokehouse is not a room. It is a decision. From outside, it looks modest, timbers gone dark and thoughtful, a door that catches and forgives, a roof that learned to breathe slowly. Inside, time changes jobs. It settles downward, rising from embers, collecting on beams, settling into meat. Weather becomes flavor. Patience becomes policy. Step in. Let the eyes forgive the dim. The first breath tastes like November with good manners, oak and ash, a whisper of apple, bacon's shorthand written in soot. This is rafter food country. Above, slabs and links hang like punctuation in winter's sentence, commas of sausages, em-dashes of hams, ellipses of future dinners. The air is a slow river. Smoke curls with a grandmother's gentleness, then leaves a note, later. A smokehouse speaks 3 languages, wood, fat, and time. Wood first. Oak is the baritone, steady, unshowy. Ash the tenor, clean, quick to light. Apple and cherry are sopranos, fruity, flirtatious. Elm is never invited. Elm sulks. Greenwood gossips, hissing, sparking, leaving bitterness. Lesson 1. Only well-seasoned wood makes well-seasoned food. Fat next. It falls in slow punctuation, stippling the stones, telling the floor what rafters already know. Early it's chatty, later it grows composed, polishing rind, and letting flavor deepen. Time, most of all, turns impatience into preservation. A day hot-tempered, a week learning manners, a month becoming wise. Salt's edges sand into sweetness. Pepper relaxes into perfume. Rafters grow heavy with a learned vocabulary. Watch the fire, not a blaze, a study. Embers smolder with clerkly seriousness. Feed with chips, not logs. Smoke is coaxed, never commanded. Too much air wakes flame, a showy cousin that burns flavor. Too little brings sulk and damp reek. The right smoke is humble and a little busy. Racks within reach hold the fidgets, rashers to turn, sausages to rotate, a small trout teaching tenderness. Higher hang the long projects, hams learning to be ham, shoulders learning patience. Even the latter smells of 50 winters of good decisions and 2 of bad luck. Tap rinds with a knuckle, let firmness speak. The smokehouse turns seasons into verbs. Autumn preserves, stay. Winter comforts, hush. Spring lingers, remember. Summer reminds butter to behave and cheese to consider the cellar. Not everything deserves smoke. Some meats are happier brined and boiled. Some vegetables want only a smoky spoon. But many humble things gain confidence. Cheap cuts, eloquent. River-strong fish speaking orchard. Stubborn rinds turning silk by patience, not clocks. Tending has a rhythm. Latch with an occupied forearm. Angle the draft so smoke travels rather than flees. Touch a link to test today's lesson. Listen for the soft spit from the pan of water beneath, keeping edges kind. Here people come to talk to meat and end up talking to themselves. Arguments become recipes. Alder versus oak, twine versus pepper vine, 2 days versus 3. Both tables eat well. Smoke forgives methods when humility is correct. Opinions drift in. Northerners cold smoke fish for weeks until flesh turns amber. Sailors suggest juniper in storms. Someone smokes butter, and the kitchen learns how a dab finishes stew like a small cello note. Rafter food isn't only meat. Herbs hang in shy bundles, absorbing polite history. Onions dangle like lanterns. Cheeses rest by the door to catch stories, not soot. Even bread visits. Yesterday's slices dried by the threshold for soups to love. The smell follows out on clothes. Identity, not odor. From 2 houses away, people know someone's been in the smokehouse. Children lean in to inhale winter's safety. Dogs promise virtue with their eyes. Cats act indifferent, then sleep on warm stones. Where the sea lives in barrels, smoke lives in people. Smoke is flavor and fence. It guards dinner from air, time, and invisible multitudes. With salt, it writes the grammar of later. Taste that grammar in a rasher. Calm at the edge, sweet insistence at the center. The knife's small iron syllable on rind. Even without meat, kettles speak smoke. Beans softened under lids that wear yesterday like a tattoo. Pottage borrowing character from beams. Smoke organizes social life. In autumn, neighbors hoist pigs onto hooks while fat drumrolls competence. In winter, a smoked hawk crosses a street like a handshake that decided to be stew. In lean times, a butcher slips a rind into a pocket with a cough. In feast times, a platter of smoked trout says rivers, and people kept promises. Mistakes teach. Flame that wakes too fast kisses ham and pride tastes bitter. Green wood makes arguments. Meat hung too close learns soot before supper. The ledger writes in practice, not shame. Next time close the draft sooner. Split logs smaller. Trust the slow wick ember on a worse day. Rafters are bookkeepers. A fingertip returns with marginalia, black dust, bacon's gratitude, winter's footnote. Some whitewash, others keep the archive. The black has weight. It smells like solutions that remembered to be delicious. Outside, the smokehouse writes the sky in grammar the town understands. Thin, steady thread means competence. Fat, loud plume means excitement or inexperience, and invites advice under the pretext of a borrowed ladle. A wrong smell, acrid, anxious, sends 3 people trotting because kitchens share lungs. When snow comes sideways and confidence fidgets, stand halfway in. Hands find kind warmth. The world contracts, hanging shapes learning to last, a floor constellated with fat, a ceiling black enough to become kind. Here, February is not a threat, it is a project. Time is taught twice. Days, how long to hang, when to rotate, where to tie, which cut must feel heavier before tasting lighter. Years, when to replace a rack, read a rafter by knuckle tone, which corner dries fastest in a river wind, why this year's applewood differs from last, and why that is mercy. Rafter food is ready when it stops arguing with a thumb, a ham that yields at the rind but holds at the bone, a sausage whose skin sings when tapped, bacon that shines like a promise and smells like a sentence near its period. No clock is needed. Clocks are for people without smokehouses. Take something down. Balance the ladder on habit and a small prayer. Free the hook. Like gravity, explain. On the table, the knife's voice changes.
bright consonant for rind, hushed vowel for fat, confident syllable for muscle. Taste. First bite maps the room, second the season, third the year. A pig who lived adequately, a garden that forgave, comfort measured in slices, not speeches. Smoke travels into kitchens and stays, as if rooms learned a new consonant. Stews finished with smoky butter become wiser. A cabbage insulted by Wintham is reconciled by a coin of ham. Beans sign peace under a bone that remembers rafters. Even eggs sit up beside a spoon of smoked cream. Rank tastes smoke differently, but rafters play no favorites. The poor smoke what they can save, the gentry what they can boast. On the plate, the first bite equalizes. Oak's sweet insistence, ash's soft vowel, apple's delicate rumor. Smoke democratizes even as it dignifies. There is always a late moment. Poker turns embers into letters. The last chip of apple sighs into ash. Racks go still. The room hums like a cat wanting acknowledgement, not lifting. Stand in the doorway and promise tomorrow. Come early, check vents, trim twine, touch rind, relearn patience. Night tests the latch, finds it firm, approves. Carry the reek back to the kitchen. It becomes a fourth seasoning after salt, thyme, and onion forgiveness. Taste. Smoke is not just flavor. It is a way to think about the future. The past hangs from beams. The future waits in the ladle. The present is warmth on a face and quiet on a tongue. Tomorrow there will be racks to turn, reek to wear, rafter food to praise without boasting. Tonight, a bowl that steam writes a name proves the lesson. Comfort is a craft, and craft is a comfort that learned to last.
Morning arrives on cartwheels. Bargaining clears its throat. The lane is damp with weather's decisions. A gull that's never seen the sea complains from a roof because complaining is its trade. Cloak close toward the square, where fresh is not a promise, but an opinion earned by distance, delay, and the diplomacy of pots. Markets wake in layers. Tables first, clanks on trestles that remember better summers. Then cloths, stiff from last week's rain, hoping to keep dirt from deciding to be bread. Then voices, jokes tested as if laughter could season onions. Last, smells, yeast with a purpose, cabbage telling truths, fish feigning modesty, brine scratching the throat like a borrowed memory. Fresh doesn't live here. It visits. A cabbage is fresh if it walked from the churchyard garden. An egg is fresh if it misplaced its hen 10 minutes ago. A fish is fresh if the river is a short story and the stall a fast reader. Grain, meat, cheese, apples from 2 parishes over, these already know how to wait. Listen for distance. Bruise has a sound when carrot meets wood. Brine hums when a barrel shoulders in. Cloth mutters as loaves are uncovered. Roads season dinner before coin is spent. If rain owned yesterday, apples taste thoughtful. If dust ruled, the bucket grows judgmental. A pig quarter that slept 5 miles away tastes of that sky, unless courtship, with fire, patience, and onions treaty, changes its mind. Begin with bread. Bread sets the basket's weather. Brown loaves, crust like armor, crumb like compromise. Manchet sits aside, a polite cloud, pretending it isn't expensive. The baker weighs slices, as if testing hunger's opinion. A heel becomes kindness, disguised as commerce. Next, the green table. Hedgerow plus courage. Parsley is morale chopped fine. Leeks are patience with ambitions. Cabbage looks like it knows more than it says. Spinach grins through dirt and promises to surrender in a pan. The seller names bundles like cousins and warns which turnip bit yesterday. Fish, because the bell turned the week that way. Herring stacked as if rehearsed. Eel like a sentence, winking at its own ending. Trout, staring with the honesty of the recently alive. The fishmonger answers with hands. Firm is now, soft is later. Too soft is chickens. He praises the river, scolds a boy, offends a cat, and balance is restored. Meat waits like a decision remade. Edges confess travel. A knuckle to a joint can feel the road. The butcher is a diplomat between diners and animals, purse and weather. A bone lands in the bag with a stage cough, generosity disguised as inconvenience. Between stalls, distance is measured in voices. This cheese learned summer and did not forget. These onions were brave under frost. These apples fell to be helpful. Stories are packaging that survives the road to the stew. Baskets declare biographies. Eels, coiled like punctuation, speak of Friday and law. A wedge of cheese and 3 onions predict a supper algorithm. A manchette and the pigeon mean wages arrived. A cabbage and a crust mean a smart promise to tomorrow. The market is a school where time teaches. Nothing just is, everything becomes. Fresh becomes kept, kept becomes softened, softened becomes shed. At the dairy, yesterday's unruly milk becomes butter with vocabulary. Cheese that swallowed meadows now speaks cellar. The dairy woman listens with her palm and hears whether others missed. Vinegar for diplomacy, salt for habit, and a wedge of hope disguised as pie. Because some days, hands want to carry a thing already finished. Saints and scams share faces, winter fresh herbs, dented pot soups better than the sum of stalls, a priest who scolds an illicit sausage and buys 2 for penance. Homeward, the basket smells like travel plans. Steps keep time with a rolling cask, an unwilling march, finished anyway. On the table, fresh stops impressing and starts helping. Red employs the room. Greens shake off market like a dog shakes rain. Fish becomes literal under heat. Meat waits for its apology. Start with water. Amnesty for road sins. Bring it to the edge of boiling and let it reconsider. Salt it with a short sea story. Onions negotiate. The smell persuades the room into partnership. Bread waits at the rim, recruiting patience. Tomorrow's pot begins today, but today's pot began yesterday. The bone that coughed into the bag agrees to be useful. Greens, after a cold bath, turn brave. Fish arrives last and leaves first. Meat in its time. The market becomes a map. The map becomes edible. Not fresh is a craft. The road is a spice, the stall a chorus, the stew the verdict. Heat softens what carts made hard. Vinegar sharpens what dust made dull. Smoke and a coin of ham revive what sky made tired. Distance is eaten and enjoyed. Small mercies. A weary apple becomes bright compote with sugar and 1 holiday clove. A traveled cabbage gains purpose. A twice-dropped carrot still lifts a stew. Distance is the straight man.
The pot is the punchline. Consider the choreography behind a spoon. Cooper, Carter, Baker, salt worker. Forests bent to circles, wheels mended quietly, bread persuaded gently, weather melted into crystals. Chew softly in gratitude. Not everything survives. Trim hurt from a turnip like a surgeon who writes poetry. Cut away the part of a joint that traveled poorly. Keep what remembered generosity. Make stock from indecision. Kitchens are courts of appeal, where pantry mistakes are acquitted by broth. Time in the pot. First boil noisy, second quiet, third agreement. Skim troubles without skimming promise. Then slice bread, ladle, sit. Freshness was never the point. Arrival was.
Morning begins with hunger doing its quiet accounting. No famine, most days, just the arithmetic of bellies, bowls, and how far a pot can stretch without tearing. Meat is a guest with a title, rare, loud, expecting the head chair. Awful is the neighbor, knocks gently, brings its own spoon. For the few, meat is a menu, capon and almond milk, venison marinated in opinions, ribs whose bones receive compliments. For the many, meat is rumor, the weak taste of pottage, grain and greens and conversation, while bones, skins, feet, and innards do the heavy lifting. Bowls never quite fill, they keep getting reassured. Walk the village at noon and hear rank. At the manor, spits click like clocks, pans speak butter, knives approve loudly. In cottages, lids hum low, wooden spoons draw patient circles, a pot considers its future. Both work toward warmth. One writes epics, the other lullabies. At the butcher, hierarchy is literal. Prime cuts lounge at eye level, loin, ribs, sirloin. Below sit what most can afford and learn to love, liver and lights, pluck, trotters with their theology of glue. The butcher reads lives by how fingers point, up for feast, down for tenderness lessons. Awful is not concession, it is craft. Liver wants a hot pan and a fast apology, onion forgiveness, vinegar diplomacy, herbs for morale. Kidneys like a good rinse and a mustard sermon. Hearts prefer time, low fire, small sips of liquid, a lid that believes in transformation. Lights need bravery and breadcrumbs. Tripe is religion. Either you convert or you don't. Converts insist patience turns honeycomb into silk. Feet and heads are structural engineers. Trotters turn water into velvet. A pig's foot dissolves into broth that holds a spoon upright and a family together. Cow heel sets like a promise. A sheep head feeds twice. Cheeks for secret happiness, bones for tomorrow's soup. Tongue, peeled after long kindness, slices like meat that remembered gentleness. Bones are the most democratic meat. They go home with everyone, by plan or coffin pocket. Roast till they smell like victory, crack to teach bread how to behave. Marrow on toast is a feast pretending not to be. Then bones return to the pot to petition water into body. When water agrees, the weak stands easier. Grain multiplies mercy, barley thickens the day, oats turn shyness into comfort. Peas pudding walks the line between spoon and slice. When a ham bone meets peas, thrift and luxury shake hands. Cabbage and leeks bring humility. Onions bring apologies. Together they fill not the bowl so much as the time between now and sleep. Bread soaks up grace. A trench of coarse rye after serving as trench becomes a second supper. A crust swept through gravy proved nothing was wasted, especially gratitude. A rare manchette slice soaks like a noble who learned a lesson and tells everyone. Listen, glue is being made. Collagen sings as it melts. The pot grows shinier, the rim friendlier. Watch stew cool and cut. Poverty invents convenience food. A slice of yesterday, fried crisp, becomes today's best idea. Feasts have their place. The Lord kills the fatted something. The hall fills with confident voices. Platters parade. The high table eats meat that remembers forests. Lower tables eat dishes that remember kitchens. Even here, offal sneaks in. Scraps become favorite pies. Gravies are bone-built. Force meats hide their lineage behind French. The poor have feast days too. Weddings that forget math and remember generosity. Funerals where sorrow stews longer than meat and feeds everyone. Christenings where caudle warms hands and unhardens hearts. In those bowls, offal and meat sit together and do not argue. Celebration is a different hunger. Waste is a double sin against purse and calendar. Paunches are scraped, cleaned, inflated like rhetoric, simmered till rhetoric becomes conversation. Blood stirs into puddings with oats until iron remembers earth. Skins become casings, casings become festivals. Even windpipes become something a grandmother swears cured coughs and grudges. A child asks, best of questions, why not the meat? The answer is a story. Animals cost, lords claim the best. Friday's bell rings often. Meat keeps poorly without salt and space. Wages return as onions. Offal is today's permission slip signed by tomorrow. Know what to do with a foot and a bone, and you can always eat. Town habits add grammar. The Skinner's yard smells of the world half changed. Fat becomes candles and pastry. The tanner's ditch explains why vinegar is good manners. Cook shops perfume lanes with pies packed so tightly that counting ingredients is like counting blessings, unnecessary. A penny buys offal wrapped in dignity. In the country, the kitchen weathers itself. Smoke writes slow syllables on ribs that might have been feast if not transformed into policy. A pot on the settle leans toward flame like a listener. The day comes through the door with its own appetite. Dinner stands up without being asked. Never quite full is not tragedy, it is rhythm. Bowls are refilled, not completed. A pot is kept back for later, and later becomes a word that means love. Leave the last ladle for the late one. Slice thin and fry crisp. Add water and call it soup. Add oats and call it porridge. Add courage and call it fine. Sometimes meat comes home in victory. A rabbit slower than hope. A bird that flew into Sunday. A pig more generous than expected. Those days smell different. The lane knows. Neighbors invent errands and walk slowly past the door. Cut thinner to go farther. Keep bones closer than friends. Offal changes jobs with seasons. Autumn, preservation's ally. Liver salted and potted, pluck into pies, skin scraped into envelopes for winter soup. Winter, comfort, tripe steaming windows, puddings insisting on seconds, broths fattening cheeks and kindness, spring, thrift, scraps revived with green, summer, quick, liver sautéed while the garden washes its hands. Etiquette from necessity, never just offal. Say, lights with onions, trotters with mustard, a good thick broth, sweetbread, imagine that. Words fatten meals, coin cannot. Parsley has the right to attend everything and improves character wherever it sits. Rank cannot escape offal. Behind show meat tapestries hides a ledger balanced with pluck. Lights and force meats, bones and gravies, rendered scraps and sauces. The best cooks eat worst cuts first, hot in the alley, where they're best. A lord's delicacy begins life as a scullion snack. There's a sound bowls make when almost, but not quite full. A ceramic throat cleared, a spoon kissing the rim. Families know it and don't mind. It means another bowl tomorrow. It means the pot wasn't greedy. It means appetite survived the meal and therefore the day. A look passes when the pot exceeds itself. Brief, private, wordless. Offal made eloquent, broth made body, bread made brave. Meat on those days is knotted with a duke in procession, there he goes, but the heart belongs to the drummer who kept time. Close the lid gently. The pot keeps speaking while it cools. Settling murmurs, a congealing whisper tomorrow's knife will translate into slices. Stack bowls where they can listen. Wipe the board with bread. Wasting gravy is a theological error. Hang the spoon where it can dream. Tomorrow, hunger will count again. Subtract weather, add work, divide a bone across 3 soups, multiply a cabbage into 6 ideas, carry over a heel of bread, round up a memory into resolve. Armed with onion forgiveness, parsley morale, pot patience, and the quiet genius of offal, another chapter will be written in the book of bowls that never quite fill and households that always somehow do.
Morning begins with a knife and a crust negotiating terms. Bread doesn't slice, it yields reluctantly, like a modest gate opening. Crumbs leap like brave soldiers and settle on the table's map to be annexed later by butter or soup. Bread isn't a side, it is the landscape, and the landscape comes with rocks. For most, bread is brown, honest, mildly combative. Maslin loaves, mixed grains, are the daily parliament. Rye and wheat arguing politely, barley interrupting when weather misbehaved. Coarse flour brings the field whole, bran, germ, everything a millstone refused to forget. A bite may include a small stone, smoothed by grinding, but still convinced it belongs. Teeth register the descent. Gritty teeth are not a metaphor. They are the day's first problem, solved by chewing and good manners. Manchet, fine white bread, is the visiting dream. Bolted flour sifted through cloth so close woven even pride can't pass. It tastes like status and ceremony, a cloud bought to float above stew on feast days or when wages remembered. If brown bread is earth, manchet is weather, light, temporary, noticed by everyone. Enter a bakery before dawn. The air has decided to be flour. On eyebrows, apron strings, the complicated curve of a baker's ear. Ovens breathe like animals trained to be gentle. The peel slides in with consonants earned by burns. Readiness is a language, a hollow knock, crust's small applause in cooling, an oven's satisfied sigh after being a sun. Bread begins in fields, but truly begins under stone. Millstones speak circles, turning grain into conversation. Coarse settings keep the story long. Fine settings shorten it into a whisper called bolted flour. Sometimes stone forgets itself and kisses a mouth without consent, your teeth. Most pretend not to notice. Supper pretends gratitude. A good loaf needs water with opinions and yeast with patience. Leaven is a nameless household pet. Yesterday kept in a bowl, said with flour, asked daily to become culture. It smells like the world trying to be better, bubbles like a joke you aren't ready to tell. A spoonful joins flour, water, salt, always salt, the steward, and then is left alone. Bread prefers to work in private. Kneading is a prayer said with shoulders. Push, fold, turn. First, sticky insolence, then a skin under the palm, springy, agreeable. Dust flour as if conferring a title.
Score like handwriting, a slash letting steam out and pride in. Bakers read loaves like letters. For the poor, bread is often the meal's only geometry. A trench of yesterday becomes today's plate. Gravy teaches it rumors, then it becomes a second supper. A heel dipped in broth is a handshake between hunger and hope. Crust rubbed with garlic and a little fat becomes bravery. Bread is not garnish. It is raft, tool, treaty. For the rich, bread signals education. Manchets arrive like compliments. Crumb pale as an idea. Chew whisper soft. Crust delicate enough to apologize without words. Yet even there, brown bread lurks where cooks eat and know better. Fine flour is polite. A stew's soul is better caught by a crust that fights back. Bolting breeds dreams. Watch fine flour fall like modest snow, while the bran stays with cat-like resilience. Onlookers imagine futures, manchet on pewter, a brown loaf on a board with a knife that knows its place, a child's mouth not arguing with grit. Bread has laws because people do. The assize ties price to weight with bureaucratic fairness. Inspectors break loaves to count honesty. Stretch flour with chalk or ash and learn that mouths judge better than magistrates. Bread has seasons. Spring hopeful. Leaven wakes easily. Summer impatient. Everything rises too fast and collapses if addressed loudly. Autumn sturdy. Ovens feel like politics done right. Winter stubborn. Leaven sulks. Water behaves like someone owed money. Tricks are learned. Keep the starter under a cloak. Warm the bowl with a prayer. Scold the oven into cooperation. A loaf speaks economics. Thin loaf, thin purse. Peas or beans in crumb, winter longer than the calendar confessed. Smoke in flavor, an oven wanting to talk. A faint ale note, wise leftovers. Unexpected crunch, a stone that loved too strongly. Teeth and bread are a complicated marriage. Stones and bran write biographies on enamel. Smiles cost. Toothaches are democratic. Bread takes some blame. Water, time, and the lack of gentle hands share it. Still, bread is unavoidable and beloved in the same bite. Crust carries a secret. Brown is flavor. Brown protects. The heel is politics. Who gets it and why? Fair houses rotate crowns without debate. Stack loaves properly and a room feels capable. 2 by the oven, 1 on the sill, 1 under a cloth that pretends not to hide wealth. Bread in sight makes a house taller. Out of sight makes it nervous. A house without bread is not a house. It is a question. A common meal, pottage and a slice of coarse bread. Spoonful, bite. Bread soaks patience, adds chew to comfort, invites jaw and hunger to agree. Add dripping, and prayer becomes tangible. Festive bread exists, raisins counted, spice whispered from far travel, calendars turning faster, slices thinner, care greater. Bread prevents arguments. Thick crust becomes a pie lid that feeds a bench. Stale crumb becomes stuffing. Breadcrumbs rescue sauces. Croutons rescue soups. A slice under meat protects plates and earns gratitude later. There are cheats and mercies. Some brighten flour with deceit. Some peel crusts for young teeth. Some call cake bread when bells insist. Bread forgives more than people. Sit with the miller. Grain arrives like rain finding work. He knows sheaf by noise, sack by smell,
steward by feel, dreams by weight, bolted for those who forget the field, coarse for those who live in it. Some nights bread is supper, onion, salt, pride chewed until it softens, with cheese, honest feast, with ale, crumbs sing. Every child learns today's bread and yesterday's and loves both. Today's elastic and fragrant, yesterday's loyal and frying into answers. By day 3, crumbs begin an afterlife, meatballs, puddings, crisp courage. Even ashes matter. Bakery air is the town's shared breath stored on rafters. Sweepings feed chickens who feed people who feed stories. Bread is cycle. Climate, culture, calendar, comfort. About grit, when a stone surprises, it isn't personal. It's the mill reminding that transformation is never clean. Chew carefully, live fully. Some prefer the compromise in the crumb, the proof that bread was grass, grass was rain, rain was a helpful cloud. Wheat is not guaranteed. Bad years make bread strange. Rye with ergot tells stories no one wants. Bean bread sits heavy. Oatcakes become law where wheat refused. People adapt, bread follows, teeth negotiate. In the end, the bread problem is a curriculum. Coarse loaves teach humility. Bolted dreams teach aspiration. Gritty teeth teach patience. Each slice is a lesson in making do better with heat, water, salt, and time. Wrap the loaf in cloth to say tomorrow. Set it on.
Step into a morning that smells like rain, reconsidering its options. The lane is soft, remembering hose and forgetting shoes. Kitchens are already awake, brine and smoke coaxing yesterday's sea into today's supper. Yet, between door and ditch, a counter-argument grows. Green, small, stubborn. Hope here is chopped finely and added last. Begin at the threshold with pots that pretend to be fields. A broken jar holds parsley that survived 3 insults and insists on being useful. Chives grow beside the step with the confidence of gossip. On the sill, time crouches like good advice. The garden needn't be large to be loud. Parsley first, morale before tactics. It won't erase the harbor. It teaches it table manners. Stirred in at the end, parsley ushers brine to the back row and gives onions better acoustics. A handful, chopped until it looks like the idea of green, helps a poor stew stand taller. Sage is an aunt with opinions, soft-voiced, iron-backed. Faintly camphor, faintly comfort, it asks fat to become flavor, not just survival. In a pan with onions and scraps, sage turns what we have into what we meant. Too much is a lecture, just enough a lullaby. Rosemary is a branch that decided to be perfume, pine and remembering. When lamb is rumor and mutton reality, rosemary says, let us pretend kindly. Tucked in near the end, it lifts the harbor note without shaming it. On coals, it teaches smoke elegance. A sprig in an apron pocket makes the market less rude. Time is countryside in small letters, the rumor that improves reputations. It threads through eel stews and pottages, taking Lent's edge off with patient humility. If parsley is morale and sage counsel, time is consensus. Marjoram is time with a blush, fragile warmth, a small citrus rumor. It makes rare chicken remember summer and teaches beans they needn't be honest. In a cheese tart, it is the unnoticed reason for a smile. In mushrooms, it finishes the sentence Earth began. Mint is the river's laugh. It grows where water muses and children fall in and rise improved. Chopped into peas, mint makes spring sound like itself. In vinegar for fish, it asks the harbor to be polite. In a cool jug after work, it is a small holiday. Lovage speaks celery with a better education. An eyebrow as a leaf, a lecture as a handful. It makes beef broth pensive and eel stock a gentleman. In pottage, it's the difference between brown and brown but interesting. Hyssop tastes like a meadow with ideas about mint. Bruise with honey over apples for clever dessert. Pinch with lamb to make Lent forgive Epiphany. Use like a rumor, not a proclamation. Bay is the quiet traveler. 1 leaf, 2 for parish-sized pots, and beans remember inner lives, fish remembers dignity. It stands behind and improves posture. Borage flowers are blue stars, persuading the tired they are not only tired. Leaves taste faintly of cucumber. Flowers on a custard are the mercy that ends a long day. Step to the hedges, libraries where books grew spines. Nettle, stingy in defense and generous in broth, tastes like brave spinach once blanched. Sorrel is lemon written by a leaf. It makes barrels apologize and tarts glow. Wild garlic announces itself before it's seen, turning boiled things deliberate, and butter into an answer. Hogweed, young, careful, correctly taught, remembers citrus and celery. The hedgerow gives, but it also quizzes. Ground ivy perfumes small beers. Meadowsweet is honey's monastic cousin. Enough blesses, too much preaches. Herbs live by a calendar. Spring, parsley, sorrel, chives, apologies accepted. Summer, mint, marjoram, thyme, crowding the path. Autumn, bay, sage, rosemary, lower voices, convinced of stew. Winter bundles whisper history into kettles. A July sprig becomes January sentence finisher. Dried herbs aren't failed herbs. They have long memories. Tie loose, hang high, away from smoke's possessiveness. Crumble with fingers that remember sunlight. Measure with ears. Stop when the pot says enough. Vinegar is the 4th herb in disguise. Minted for fish, tarragon for lucky chickens, raspberry for poetic salads. It swings meals from barrel to bowl, makes cabbage forgive its birth, dissolves road dust from far-traveled broth. Mustard is herb and attitude. Seeds pounded with vinegar and salt teach pork charm and make beef be brief. Too much tastes like anger. Balance is learned. The garden is also a medicine chest. Feverfew stares headaches down. Chamomile orders sleep. Hyssop and horehound debate coughs. Pennyroyal, handled wisely, evicts insects and rash ideas. Cooks are often nurses. Flavor is often therapy. Superstitions have stems. Rosemary for remembrance. Bay in pockets for exams, even neighborly monologues. Sage planted means staying. Rue at the door says bad luck no, good luck behave. Hedgerows teach thrift. Cut where growth heals. Leave every third plant for birds, bees, and next year. Learn which ditch water is honest. Find the best herbs beside the worst nettles. Become ambidextrous. One hand cuts, one apologizes with dock leaf. In the pot, herbs do politics, mediating salt and smoke, river and road, barrel and field. They soften reputations and lift histories. They make today taste like today, though half the bowl is borrowed from last autumn. The poor can taste rich if herbs are well chosen and late. Marrow and sage early, parsley and lemon or sorrel late. Mint with peas as they leave the pan. Thyme at the start, marjoram at the end like a kind shawl. Not garnish, liturgy. Serve. A bowl smelling of patience. A crust remembering a millstone. A spoonful that traveled river to hedgerow to hearth, topped with green that looks like yesterday forgiving today. Asked what's in it, answer, not much, meaning everything small and brave. Night ties bundles high, labels with string and memory, makes winter less certain. Vinegar jars refill with ideas. A rubbed sprig says, we will manage. Hedgerows are libraries for people who read with knives, and hope is a cookbook written in leaves.
Morning begins with a pale churn and a hopeful shoulder. The cow have already done her part. Patient breath in a field that pretends not to be wet, grass turned into potential. Indoors, the room smells of cool stone and last night's steam. A shallow pan holds milk that calmed itself so cream could climb like a modest guest who knows where to sit. Dairy here is a daily negotiation with weather, time, and the idea of fresh that never quite trusts July. Lift the cream with a spoon that knows not to disturb the rest. It gathers like fog, thick, reluctant. Skimmed milk below waits to become something else. Curds later, perhaps. A pudding if eggs are kind. A pottage helper if they aren't. Cream drops into the churn with the sound of small plans. Add yesterday's buttermilk, the story so far, and set the dasher. Churning is a shoulder asking to sing. Butter happens slowly, then all at once. Cream forgets liquidity, remembers granules, then the churn speaks thud instead of slosh. Pour off buttermilk, pale, agreeable, into a pail for tomorrow's bread or today's soup. What remains is gold in soft clumps, hungry for cold water and salt. Wash the quiet leftover buttermilk, press and turn with paddles until it remembers it is butter, not ambition. A pinch of salt turns it into memory. Too much turns it into lecture. Wrap cool, hide from July. Summer is suspicious. Butter knows it. On warm days, it pretends courage and slumps into honesty. Households practice the cool place. A dairy room, if lucky. A stone shelf near the floor and away from sun, if not. Jars sit in water to their shoulders like small ladies with decorum. Lids wear damp cloths. Windows open by night, shut by noon. Portions shrink, use quickens, trust thins. If a pat tastes too lively, vinegar and a prayer may persuade it. Better to churn early, store lower, eat sooner. Cheese is dairy's long game, planning to meet January. Milk is coaxed with rennet, calf wisdom lending structure to a liquid that wanted to wander. Warm gently, stir. Rennet speaks, milk listens. Curds gather like quiet guests, waste slips away like polite refusal. Cut curd neat,
Calm cheese needs tidy geometry. Stir, warm, stir, then ladle to a cloth-lined mold and let gravity begin its sermon. Weights arrive, a board, a stone, a press if fortunate, patience always. Turn often. Salt teaches manners, rubbed on rind or dissolved in brine, then time walks in with a chair and cheese sits. Days become weeks, become months if shape and climate allow. The cellar is a school where wheels acquire accents, oak, damp stone, perhaps a rumor of smoke shared with the kitchen. Flip, wipe, bless good rinds, curse visitors with poor intentions. There's a cheese for every timeline. Fresh curds, white, squeaky, gullible, eat well the day they're born. Softs, cream-rich, salt-kissed, want 3 days and a soft voice, and a true cool. Hard farmhouse wheels dream through Michaelmas and Advent, waking us slices that smell like meadows rewritten by caves. Each answers a different question. Now, later, trade, January. Buttermilk is the kitchen's kindly aunt, tenderizes dough, smiles at pancakes, persuades tabbage to behave. Sour can feel like sense when heat is unreasonable. Clotted cream, where known, is indulgence turned method. Pans near the fire dream themselves thick. The skimmings become joy on a tart or on bread. The rest returns to the churn and the circle completes. Wait is not nothing. It is 1,000 quiet jobs. Feed pigs, bless bread, turn tart, and then turn soups learned. Boiled down with patience into humble sweet. Mixed with herbs and salt into a drink that doesn't cure everything, but comforts enough. Cottages and manors differ and rhyme. The manor's dairy has tile coolness, pans like bishops, boiled cloths remembering whiteness. The dairymaid's hands decide butter or trade. The cottage dairy is wherever cool hides, a stone shade, a north shelf, the well's neck. Necessity remembers better than luxury. Wise hands make both yield good cheese. Dairy speaks season. Spring milk is grass told fresh, high, sweet, loose. Summer swings between glory and trouble. Fat rises eager, everything sprints. Salt cames, shade soothes. Autumn calms, deeper fats, rounder flavors. Winter thins or vanishes. Preservation eats more than people do. Earlier wheels must be disciplined. Summer's suspicion includes wildlife with questions. Flies arrive with royal entitlement. Cloths cover pans, herbs hang by doors, smoke drifts on purpose. Carried milk, soured by intent, is planned. Turned milk, soured by accident, is pudding or pancake before exile. Salt is steward. Firming butters resolve, guarding rinds, inviting nobility over infamy until it bullies. The tongue must learn mercy's line. Dairy connects tables. A spoon of cream buys toddler silence. A knob of butter finishes stew and upgrades morale. A wedge makes travel bread lunch. A cup of whey traded across a fence improves bread and, sometimes, attitudes. Markets show the traveling circus. Butter and leaf wrapped pats, curd still warmed in baskets, wheels on barrels like moons. Misadventures educate. Barn tasting butter from bag company, cruel blues on inattentive cheese, scalded milk because a child was funny at the wrong time. Fixes become habits. Shut doors, boil cloths, save jokes for after the ladle. Dairy is medicine in everything but name. Hot milk with honey is a drinkable prayer. Cheese lends strength. Buttermilk kisses sunburn. Whey rinses sore mouths. Nothing cures everything, but dairy cures enough. Class writes with dairy. The rich afford art disguised as waste, syllabubs, perfumed custards, butter sculptures. The poor practice art disguised as thrift, grilled rinds on stale bread, butter scraped thin as blush, curds folded with herbs into omelets that make an egg seem 3.
Both end with the same sigh when a curd tart wobbles just right. Storage is choreography. Cool shelves, honest air, dry cloths, scoured pans, a butter pot buried to its neck, a cheese shelf checked by knuckle knock. Learn the smell of almost problem and the feel of nearly right. The body keeps temperature better than words. Butter and bread are a daily treaty. Dripping sometimes substitutes without breaking peas. Feast days, butter and honey build a church on a slice. Fast days, cheese becomes protein and excuse. Cows, goats, ewes, different sentences in the same story. Cow plain spoken and abundant. Goat tricky and kind to short grass. Ewe rich and secondary currency. Mixed milk cheeses are marriages arranged by necessity and often happy. Dairy in a difficult climate is less miracle than discipline. Morning shoulder, midday salt, afternoon cloth, evening shelf, night air. Know when to churn, press, hide, share. Outsmart suspicious summer with early hours, shade, enough salt and cool hands. It is grass turned into winter, a gold smear on brown bread in a room that smells of steam, stone, and satisfaction. When asked, "What's in this?" answer, "Milk and time," meaning animals, weather, hands, patience, salt, 100 small choices, and a day that didn't get too hot too quickly. Pass the butter before July remembers the window is open.
Sweetness does not belong to everyone. Sugar arrives like a titled guest in hard white cones that must be broken with iron and persuasion. Spice is its entourage, clove like a nail, cinnamon like a soft brick, ginger laughing hot, pepper coughing coins, nutmeg and mace as gradable islands. Together, they turn kitchens into theaters and teeth into ledgers. The poor meet sweet at festivals. The rich meet it daily and pay twice. Coin first, pain later. Sugar doesn't pour. It yields under blows. A conical loaf, smug, wrapped, meets hammer and knife. Flakes fall, dust collects. Refined means strangers taught syrup obedience over distant fires. Honey lives in hedges. Sugar rides ships. Honey is flirtation. Sugar is policy. At court, sweetness becomes architecture. Marchpane, almond paste with ambition, appears as walls, beasts, ideas. Gold leaf whispers for eyes, not tongues. Comfits, seeds rolled in sugar day upon day, glitter like tiny planets. Tables map empires, cake castles, pastry ships, swans pretending themselves. Status tastes like almonds and empire. Spice is sweet's grammar. Cinnamon warms, clove in sentences, ginger exclaims, nutmeg confides, mace refines, pepper spins. Saffron, not sweet, behaves like light. Custards turn proud, rice turns sunset. Anise laughs. Coriander masquerades as candy, then reminds mouths of law. Lint scolds meat and ignores mace. Ginger makes fast day stews feel like feasts without breaking rules. Poor sweetness is a pocket of kindness. Honey drips when the hive is generous. Apples leather slowly and hang like promises. Pears poach in ale with a clove and forgive days. A pinch of bought sugar, guarded for Christmas, turns puddings into sermons against despair. Raisins count themselves into bread. A stamped gingerbread sticks to fingers and says life is a fair for an hour. Rich sweetness wears masks. Custards stand or collapse by egg temper and scullery weather. Quince paste shine from argued mornings in copper pans with memories. Peel, candied and recandied, turns bitterness into talk. Violets confect secrets. Comfits freshen politics. Laughter is a little too loud. Pain arrives later, private. Teeth keep accounts. Daytime smiles, nighttime aches. Apothecaries sell clothes to numb and scold. Vinegar and myrrh rinse penance. Barber surgeons collect the debt. Courtly teeth are favors, bright, then missing, then mannered. Gilded sugar is theater and tool. It keeps company with fruit on long voyages, makes jam lie happily under snow, rescues quince from rumor. In a cold room, a spoon of cherry preserve is a window. The chain that brings sweet is long and unkind. Caravans and cargoes break deserts and oceans. Sailors thin their souls. Merchants count. Fields far away bruise under labor. The polite room hears graters on nutmeg and forgets the middle. Honey keeps its own politics. Local veils, local smoke, local flowers. May is blossom, August insistence. Honey sweetens grudges into negotiations. On eel with mustard, in ale with heat, and a posset at bedtime. Everyone trusts honey. Not everyone can afford sugar. Sugar is also disguise. A marchpane fish obeys fasting and melts into forgiveness. A peas cod bursts sugared beans like a joke. A pie bleached cherries, not pigeons, and no one complains. Rules bow without kneeling. Markets keep a small tent for sweet. Ounces of miracles, paper twists of spice, almond buns behind glass, a boy sneezing pepper and laughing his own stock. A farthing buys 10 minutes of forgetting. Joy has poor pockets. Pickpockets do well. Economy whispers even in silk rooms. Sugar measured, spice locked, keys at waists, ledgers in chests. Clothes are counted like coppers, pepper like favors. A spilled spoon of sugar becomes a week's lesson. Not all sweetness wears coin. Fruit keeps the calendar. Strawberries as minutes, cherries as proofs, plums as answers, pears as sermons, quinces as chapters. Apples are paragraphs all year. Dried fruit is winter's footnote. The poor sweeten with time and heat, the rich with ships. Both swear a baked apple with spice is better than most prayers. Sweetness defends as well as delights. Nutmeg, mace, pepper, vinegar reframe travelers of meat. Sauces become charity. Clove numbs truths and molars alike. Cinnamon sells health. Ginger insists on blood warmth. Saffron paints when butter can't. The dotted line between medicine and dessert is crossed nightly. Hippocras for souls. Treacle for snakes and sin, if jars are to be believed. Children learn sweet by smell. Marchpane Day is almonds and a rumor of oranges. 12th night crowns a child with a bean and crusted sugar. Easter simnel layers fruit and memory. Any Thursday, a scrap of candy peel bribes a chore. Sugar isn't only white. It grades to muscovado, dark, damp, molasses strong. Refined sells prestige by the pinch. Muscovado sells character by the spoon. Gingerbread made dark tastes like thunder reconsidered. Skill hides behind performance. Seeds rolled day after day in whispering syrup. Threads of sugar judged by ear and finger. Peel turned from bitter to story.
ribbons pulled while hands learn burns and sleep. Everyday sweet is grace, honey and beer for ache, currants and suet to flatter Sunday, a wise salted, gently spiced custard cooled enough to tame July, cider boiled to winter syrup, a slice fried and dripping with found sugar, finishing arguments. Sweet marks time like bells, Advent heavy and quiet, Christmas plum loud, Lent almond forgiving, Easter unpeels what January denied, harvest puts honey everywhere, weddings wear comfits, funerals rose water, baptisms milk and sugar steaming scents into rooms. In the end, sweetness here is relief, more than sugar, from salt, smoke, monotony, from sorrow and strict calendars, from winters that forget to end. It remains scarce, powerful because it is. Used well, it is mercy in a spoon. Used foolishly, theater with consequences. Either way, it tastes like hope that learned to boil.
The day begins with a bell and a ledger. Meals are not just cooked, they are witnessed. Church sets the calendar, crown the price, gilds the standard, neighbors the eyes. Hearth pots simmer, but menus are negotiated with towers, markets, and men who carry lists. First, the calendar, iron-voiced and insistent. Fridays bend toward fish. Vigils do too. Lent spreads a long, spare table between winter's end and spring's certainty. Ember days arrive like precise weather. Bells divide appetites into allowed and forbidden, preferred and punished. Not just piety, logistics in a cassock. Rivers swell with business, barrels with brine, kitchens with strategy. Fish Day is an inspection route. Officials walk markets sniff first, coin second. A Friday beef steam earns fines. A Saturday pie that forgets a vigil earns humiliation. Shudders remember. One wrong stew, and a man argues his faith with a magistrate who wants to discuss sausages. The wise host hangs eels like confession and keeps mustard to distract zeal. Lent is an economy. The meat ban moves money from hoof to scale. Salt merchants become bishops of flavor. Coopers become calendar makers. Fishmongers become practical theologians. Kitchens adapt in 3 voices: river, eel, herring, trout; dairy, where custom or dispensation allowed; and cunning. Almond milk for imitation wealth. Oil folded into fish that wanted to be feast. Vinegar marries herring. Herbs court monotony. Prayer steadies patience. The crown keeps the loaf honest. The assize of bread and ale is arithmetic with teeth. Grain price up, loaf must follow or fines do. Inspectors break loaves like scripture. Chalk and bone ash cheats crack under fingernails and laughter. Ale is dipped and judged. A good baker wears honesty like steel, visible, heavy. Guilds hold courts of appetite. Fishmongers license stalls, butchers certifying knives and hours. Victualers swear standards every market morning. A guild mark over a door is halo and threat, promise to customers, invitation to rivals. Apprentices learn law with hands, how much salt makes a barrel safe, how red is still honest on a Thursday, how bright an eye must be to say today. Licensing reaches kitchens by the back door. To sell a pie is to need a paper. To pour ale, another. To host a table, both and good manners. A widowed tavern keeper polishes her license like a relic, and her mugs with the same cloth. A cookshop fragrant with 7 yesterday stew posts permits in the best light, and mines bells with a thief's vigilance. Neighbors enforce edges. A Friday sausage is not only unlawful,
it is rude. Eyes follow steam, doors judge, gossip carries sentence. Yet neighbors also save each other. An eel stew placed quietly, an inspector's cousin fed for the road, the bowl somehow empty at counting. Communities live in the gap between written rules and eaten meals. Royal policy stirs the pot. Fish days are war days in disguise. Keep fishermen employed. Keep sailors practiced. A plate of herring is defense with dill. For God and country, whispers proclamation. The cook salts twice. Distance taxes meat. Preservation becomes politics. Salt, a revenue. Smoke, a protest. Vinegar, an argument that can't be arrested. Forest law patrols more than trees. Deer are the kings. Rabbits and birds echo the rule in smaller ink. A snare in the wrong hedge preaches gallows. Kitchens make innocent dishes taste like victory. Hedgerow pies thick with herbs and thrift. River fish sauced like a hunt because rosemary remembers. Game forbidden becomes flavor permitted. Sanitation wears a crude badge. Markets get swept after plague's lesson. Street slaughter is pushed to shambles that collect blood like rent. Offal must move fast or be fined by noses. Water sources acquire watchers. Law cannot outrun summer, but it can put space between barrel and cesspit and insist on sun where rot prefers shade. On paper, punishment is crisp. Fines, stocks, confiscations, shame. In practice, enforcement is a stew. Zeal, laziness, favoritism, chance. Letters excuse famous cooks. Unknown women have none. A magistrate who loves eel reads mercy in ambiguity. One who hates it finds ham. The wise memorize faces as well as rules. Monasteries once ran the best fast-day kitchens, turning fish to poetry and almond milk to architecture. Reforms closed doors. Knowledge fled into towns and hid as Friday pie. Law rearranged tables, cooks rearranged methods. The pot indoors. Household rules are the strongest law. Save a portion for latecomers. Smell before pour. Parsley last. Don't feed the cat on Friday where the street can see. Such habits keep fines theoretical and neighbors kind. Law is a wall. Custom the door. Wisdom the hinge. Dispensations exist, and everyone knows who gets them. The sick, rule-breaking broth that saves breath. The very young, milk that ignores calendars. The old, spoonfuls of remembered meat. The traveling, bread and cheese without questions. The powerful, letters. The powerless, neighbors. Prices are policed in theory, negotiated in fact. Bread must weigh. Ale must not drown. Fish must claim a Tuesday honestly. Storms fine faster than clerks. Markets argue with sky. Kitchens then do their other work, turning what law allowed and luck left into comfort that tastes like obedience and wit. Words matter. Pottage with herbs says nothing about bones. Fish pie can mean yesterday plus dill. Friday broth closes questions. Steam matters too. Vinegar on a fish day writes innocence into the street. At table, all of it is tasted. Bells and rivers in Friday stew, assize and miller in loaf, guild and sleep in pie, inspector and oath in ale. Liberty tastes like second without guilt, like meat on Sunday earned by 6 Fridays, like a pie that needs no beetle explained. Laws pinch and protect. The trick is to eat under both. Night banks the hearth and the ledger. Were bell, beetle, book, neighbor, child, and hunger appeased? Did we avoid fines and find flavor? Keep the letter when the spirit was kind, bend the letter when the spirit insisted? Most nights, yes enough to sleep. Morning begins again with bell and ledger. Fish day, meat day, feast day, fast day. Hands will put comfort in bowls that pass inspection. Asked, "What's in this?" the answer stays true and larger than words. Onion, herbs, a little vinegar, and what was permitted, meaning patience, wit, obedience, hope.
The street wakes before the sun is helpful. Wheels mutter, shutters yawn, braziers bloom, little red arguments against fog. If home dinner is a conversation, street food is a chorus. Quick voices, hot hands, comfort that fits in a crust. Taverns open like forgiving mouths. Not a feast day, not a famine day, just a day that needs feeding in the key of hurry. Begin where air is busiest, pie sellers. Hand pie stacked like folded promises. Hot water crust is the working architect. Thick walls, good corners, a lid that can be a plate, and a plate that can be lunch. Inside, thrift performs talent. Pork scrap with sage whispering prosperity. Eel with parsley tasting like Friday remembered cheerfully. Minced beef with pepper and a rumor of clove pretending to be payday. Children follow steam. Adults pretend not to. A proper pie stall is small theater. Knives flash, lids lift, gravy sighs. The vendor keeps the best piece near the edge for the one who looks like they need it, and they usually do. Money changes hands, heat changes minds. A pie cools as quickly as gossip. Eat now or confess to seagulls later. Across the lane, oysters argue for democracy. A pail of river bivalves sits beside a man with a fearless knife. Split, twist, flick. Liquor offered on the shell like a sermon to a street congregation. Laborers slurp standing, clerks slurp philosophically. A veiled lady slurps and feels better than law allows. Vinegar and pepper punctuate. Bread knows its job. Soak, swipe, repeat. Further in, a tavern's doorway writes steam poems. Onions forgiving, meat reconsidering, beer admitting it is morning. The stew is not yesterday. It is 7 yesterdays. Saved, skimmed, improved, until the pot remembers more than most midyears. Bone from Tuesday, bacon heel from Wednesday, cabbage that knew Saturday. Each day laid itself down and said, "Make me better." The ladle, being diplomat, serves the past, still willing to help. A tavern bench is citizenship with splinters. Habit, not rank, arranges seats. Mason with mortar in his beard, a widow who keeps accounts, a sailor whose legs doubt land, an apprentice drinking because taste is cheaper than courage. A bowl lands, a hill of bread lands, a pewter of ale lands. Conversation begins where heat ends. Street food keeps its own clock. Morning, griddled oatcake spread with dripping that remembers someone else's roast. Warm ale whisked with egg for winter, portable courage. Midday, pies parading, oysters at a gallop, skewers from birds with new ideas about pepper. Evening, stew, always. Cheese with a rind that keeps promises, bread that forgives the day. Late, eels from a lantern stall, sauce deciding between mustard and virtue. Itinerant geniuses appear, women with hot chestnuts that smell like yes. Men with gingerbread stamped with lions and hearts, pocket bravery. A boy with toasted cheese on bread, edges charred into satisfaction. A girl with milk that is mostly milk and partly sermon. Drink, and your bones will stop telling rain stories. The street hustles, politely or loudly, and approves of itself. Taverns carry a syllabus of comfort. Soup first, beer always, beef sometimes, stories constantly. House pottage is policy. Barley, peas, onions, roots, and a scrap that dreamed of being meat. A coin of smoked ham at the end makes the whole bowl look at itself with pride. Faces are known, bowls are kept. Yours, says the keeper, putting thicker stew before the bricklayer and thinner before the clerk who writes about bricks. Not all street food fits a crust. There are fritters when oil is reasonable and apples want admiration. Hot pea soup pours from a spouted can into mugs that once pretended to be clean. Pickled moons of onion, argumentative cucumbers, beets that flatter eggs purple. Sharpness cuts salted tongues and smoke-tired noses like a bell in fog. Sellers sing because singing sells. Hot pies, oysters, fat and fair, puddings. Some flirt, some argue with invisible critics. Coins answer like applause. A constable frowns officially and later eats 2 kais privately. A priest walks fast past oysters, slow past gingerbread, buys gingerbread for a child who doesn't exist. A dog studies metaphysics beneath the sausage man and adopts a philosophy based on gravity and hope. 7 yesterday stew deserves more words. Day 1, idea. Day 2, system. Day 3, it knows more than you. Each morning, cool, lift fat, wipe kindly, coax fire, reheat to honesty, add footnotes from market. It survives inspection by boiling when watched, and because inspectors understand dinner better than paper. It survives summer by wisdom and salt, winter by tasting like warmth that found a spoon. Unwritten tavern rules. Don't drink what you can't spell after 2 cups. Don't borrow knives. Share mustard. It is a commonwealth. Nod when sailors say pepper grows in sacks. Let solitary eat alone. If stew is thin, thicken it with a joke. If thick, let silence work. Here, legality and mercy meet. Fish days see beet bleeding pies convincingly innocent. Friday menus are sermons in eel and herring. Saturday repents with bacon. Inspectors are human. They know sky workers need heat more than theory. Cooks keep vinegar steam by the door. Innocence in the street. Dangers exist. Bad oysters argue back. Pies left too long cough. Ale watered to amnesia gathers flies and shame. Half-hot stew invents alphabets in the gut. Reputation is seasoning you can't buy. The street remembers who made it sick and who made it better. Comfort arrives precisely. A pie lid's convincing crack. Oyster cold, followed by warm bread reason. Steam that unknots a forehead. A corner where elbows counsel and jugs refill themselves because the keeper knows the weak. The moment mustard believes in a sausage, chestnuts persuading frost to stay if it behaves. Stalls specialize by corner, oysters by the fish gate, gingerbread and simnel by church bells, decision tasting pies near the shambles, eels and vinegar sneezes by the river, travelers' skewers at the gate, flavors like half-told stories. Money behaves differently. A farthing buys a morning changed. A penny buys a lunch that could have been a mistake, but wasn't. A groat buys a corner, a bowl, a second ladle, 20 minutes of anonymity. Credit has faces, not paper. Next week, to honest hands with hungry children. Now, to a gentleman who says later in French. Taverns are newsrooms in disguise. Ships in, taxes out, scaffold survived, marriages to boys who smell like pepper. Rumors outrun stew, trail ale. Truth arrives with the second jug. Kindness hides in corners.
an extra pie lid for a properly grateful child, the deepest oyster for a mason with bad news boots, the last bowl that wasn't for the late one. The street is hard. It is also crowded with private mercies that smell like pepper. If asked where to eat, follow steam and jokes. Bad food makes no one funny. Sit where spoons shine from use, not polish. Choose the pie the seller eats, the stew that makes the keeper close his eyes, the oysters from the clean knife and quick thumb. At dusk, stalls fold like tents after victory. The street exhales. Pans are scraped, knives wiped. Last chestnuts agree to be tomorrow's porridge. Taverns deepen, the stew becomes tonight and seeds tomorrow. Coins not in cloth, tables are wiped as if erasing the day's mistakes. A gingerbread lion tastes like courage. Night eats the street and leaves kitchen lights like crumbs for morning. Somewhere a pot cools in skins, tomorrow's peel and praise.
The smell is the first physician. Before law, prayer, or kindly herb, a nose at the door judges dinner. Sickness often arrives disguised a supper. Fat gone loud, fish gone brave, flour carrying a field's mistake. Ale tired of being clean. Cooks learn to read danger in steam and silence, to hear the wrong fizz under a bung, to see colors that mean no, and to turn bad news into smaller trouble with fire, salt, vinegar, and thyme. Barrels are savior and suspect. A good cask keeps October alive till February. A bad one teaches the street new words. Staves shrink or swell, hoops slacken, brine walks, and safety turns interesting. Tap, sniff, listen. Good brine smells blunt and competent. Bad brine smells like rumor turned true. Then the protocol. Skim the bloom, draw a ladle, boil hard with bay and mustard seed. Test what can be saved. If meat recovers after soaking and a rolling boil, supper survives. If not, change the plan. Cut away, render honest fat, feed the chickens the rest. Scald and ash the cask until the wood forgets. Fish tells time with eyes. Bright is now. Cloudy is stories. Sunk is regret. Inland, delay makes poets of fishmongers and skeptics of cooks. Herring and cask can sing for weeks. Riverfish has an afternoon to persuade a pan. Stockfish rarely spoils, but it can sour if soaked in careless water. Cure it with salt, patience, and the mallet's grammar. Eel forgives much, but not hot days without shade. When fish airs, deploy the trinity, boil, acid, and herb. Vinegar quiets danger and memory. Parsley and dill rewrite the sentence. Heat lays down law. If it still refuses the courtroom, the dog dines well, and the family eats onion soup with pride. Fats are weather's victims. In July, butter considers other careers. Dripping left warm invents uncast flavors. Lard sulks. The fix is choreography. Store low and cool, cover with water or brine. Keep portions small, salt modestly, and use quickly. If butter wakes lively, wash in cold water, knead with a pinch of salt, then use where onion and heat will forgive. Truly rancid fat is chemistry's no. Wise kitchens don't argue. Grain carries invisible strangers. Rye can hide ergot's bad dreams. Wheat ground with grit grinds smiles away. Oats and barley sour cheerfully when wet walks with them. The hedge, mixed loaves, long boiling in pottages, and a palate trained to spit the first bite if flour tastes like millstone or river by accident. When bread goes odd too fast, make puddings or fry crumbs. Heat and a little sugar tame small sins. Water chooses sides. Wells too near middens write biographies of mistakes. Households brew small ale because boiling remembers what clean forgot. Even then, ale turns sly. Skin, sour beyond virtue, hiss that isn't yeast. Reboil, ginger it, drink soon. Or garden it and forgive yourself out loud. Vegetables err politely. Cabbage keeps secrets. Onions keep promises. Greens go yellow and tell you. Cure with the knife. Cut, sniff, rinse, blanch. Vinegar and salt chaperone. A quick brine turns a question into a side. Mushrooms are where courage ends and experience begins. Only the ones a grandmother names with her eyes come indoors. Milk is a clock. Morning sweet, afternoon thinking, evening ready to be something. Summer auditions curds without asking. Decide whether to call it turned and make pudding on purpose, or trouble and send it gratefully to the pig. Cheese blooms good and bad. Brine wipe, flip often, feed the cellar air, cut out villains, keep saints. Butter remembers barns if churned near strong smells. Shut doors, boil clods, teach it to forget. Illness follows error at its own pace. Belly choirs announce supper's sin. Fevers come for reasons and for none. The coping kit is older than names. Boil more, brew stronger, thin porridge for sore bellies, thick broth for tired bones, possets when sleep is the only honest medicine, mint and fennel to ease, vinegar cloths for brows, caraway and anise confits to calm the afterward, honey nurses, ginger befriends, clove numbs, wine persuades, time judges. When meat is high, spice and heat become diplomats. Pepper and vinegar argue arrogance into manners. Mustard supplies plausible deniability. If pride proves moral rots rather than theater, feed only the story bowl. Let bread enjoy safe dripping. Cookshops live under watch for a reason. A pot that never empties can grow a family tree of mistakes. Good houses keep weekday liturgy. Refresh daily, boil hard, scrape clean when the pot tells you to, sell out when weather lies. Street pies are audits in crust. Buyers break one and read the steam. Rituals that look like superstition work like science. First spoon to the nose, second to the lips, third to the elder who has lived through more summers. Skim foam until it stops telling stories. Never add fresh to old without boiling them into one new truth. Keep vinegar, salt, bay within reach, hope and onions closer. Taste with a clean spoon. Let the mean spoon only stir. If a lid pops in storage, it is a traitor. If a jar weeps, replace, don't console. Tools carry yesterday into today. Boards that met raw bask in sun. Fish knives bathe in boiling water. Milk cloths go to the pot with ash and salt. Hands tell fewer stories if rinsed in vinegar water. Brooms heal, so does light. Cats and flies practice sabotage, one with gifts, one with judgment. Nets, covers, herbs hung like green bouncers keep wings from worship. A fly in ale writes a poem nobody wants. Strain and reboil or learn to love vinegar that day. Children and elders eat by different treaties. First ladle, last boil. Toasted bread dipped in wine or ale persuades stubborn stomachs. Broth whispered at the bedside keeps people in the world. A soft egg under salt and sage returns color better than speeches. Cupboards borrow from apothecaries hourly, rue and rosemary compresses, hyssop and whorehound syrups, Hippocrates for rebel bellies, sugared caraway to keep arguments from returning, clean wood charcoal for pastes people trust more than they admit. None of it replaces luck, all of it replaces despair. Community is antidote. When one barrel fails, another ladles. When a well sours, a spring gate forgets its latch. Sickness isolates, kitchens contradict. Covered bowls carry mercy farther than sermons. Language helps. Bad food earns names. Loud fat, sly ale, high meat, green cheese, proud fish. Good habits earn proverbs. Boil what doubts, roast what boasts, salt what waits. Sauce forgives, but not sin. Bread is the body's lawyer. Vinegar remembers. Winter hides germs and invents others. The first fall spring tests barrels. Summer invents speed as a virtue. Shade becomes recipe. Dawn, a kitchen hour. Some plagues outran pans. Then food becomes the second wall. Broths thin then thick. Clean water by fire. Soft bread by patience. Herbs for comfort, not cure. Kitchens turn infirmary. Recipes turn letters home. Stay. In sum, notice early, cook longer, sour wisely, salt modestly and always, store low and cool, clean with heat and ash, believe the elder's face, feed risk to pigs and pride to dogs, eat onions, share bowls and rules, forgive food its nature by changing it into something safer at a pace called patience. Hunger is dangerous. So is haste.
Begin at the high table, where silver turns candlelight into theater and velvet pretends to make mouths wiser. The steward's list reads like a voyage: sturgeon, lamprey, pike, oysters, cod, anchovies, olives, capers, and the kitchen translates geography into dinner. Beneath gilded pastry and clove-breathed sauces, one bass note hums in every bite: the sea. Salt in barrels, brine in casks, smoke in rafters, vinegar on tongues. The rich dined wider, not freer. Lamprey is the court's indulgent joke, crowned in pastry, perfumed with mace and pepper, paraded like a procession. Slice, and truth steps forward. A fish that traveled in brine met vinegar for safety before spice for status. Courtly, not for escaping the sea, but for parading it. Sturgeon tells the same truth in another accent. A fish treated like meat, larded, roasted, sauced as if it had antlers, yet arriving with companions called salt and thyme. The kitchen stages a forest hunt underwater. The tongue still hears the tide. Even when meat appears, the sea sits beside it. Venison that waited under salt, boar brined for a generous calendar, beef casked across days to flatter a feast. Gilded browns in forest perfumes cloak preservation. Put in a knife and listen, a clean salt edge where safety shook hands with flavor. Pantries of rank hold borrowed coasts, anchovies, olives, capers. An anchovy melted into sauce convinces veal to sound worldly. Capers snap like green commas. Olives, brined and confident, let a platter say, "I traveled," without leaving the hall. The sea, jarred and persuasive, underwrites sophistication. Oysters are the rare point where rich and poor meet, cheap in ports, architectural at court, raw with vinegar, baked under crumbs, immediate amid delayed flavors. The shell still drips the estuary sentence: tied in, tied out, swallow now. Salt itself is furniture.
the great salt, carved, heavy, divides rank as surely as it seasons. Who sits above it is politics. The same salt already drew borders on the food. What survived week, journey, plan? They possess more. They don't escape it. Salt is taste, calendar, crown. Sugar and spice sing descants over the sea's drone. Quince paste glows, marchpane castles persuade, Hippocras warms the private room. Luxury tries to erase logistics, candied peel remembers brine, a cool custard remembers cellars, dessert rebels against the sea, never defeats it. Wine and vinegar conduct, wine softens and flatters, vinegar sharpens and secures. Verjuice and spice teach pike to be polite inland. A splash turns yesterday into today. Still the orchestra keeps time. Salted bass, smoked tenor, brined alto. In the private banquet course, perfumes, wafers, confits, candied fruit, the richest room argues for forgetting barrels and bells. Yet confits were fennel and caraway, tamed in careful syrup. Peels began in salt. Rosewater traveled preserved. The sea's grammar, keep, carry, wait, structures the confectioner's lyric. Rank alters recipe more than flavor. The poor soak, boil, forgive. The rich soak, gild, announce. Both skim scum, rely on vinegar when barrels sulk, add parsley last to teach dinner manners. The Lord's table spreads the map. The cottager's bowl narrows the world. The sea writes both menus. Cheese plays both sides. A hard wheel shaves into pottage at home and on to greens at court. It tastes equally of cellars and salt. Butter, when summer behaves, glosses cabbage and pea puree with the same golden logic. Cream kept cool turned kind. Dairy speaks climate. Salt gives grammar. Spits and smoke follow wealth like hounds. Geese turn in rows, basted with salted broth. Ribs drip over embers. The sweetness on crust, flame meeting brine's protection, still tastes like winter plans executed with summer patience. Smoke is land's reply to sea's decree, both audible under applause. Fast days buy theatrics, not exemption. Trout with almond milk masquerades. Lamprey crowns replace capons. Eel pies get witty. Spice speaks louder to distract. The river still purveys. The barrel guarantees. Vinegar signs. Obedience tastes expensive and salt-edged. Imports flatter. Pepper modernizes venison. Ginger tells travel. Cinnamon turns fruit pottage into event. Saffron paints broth into sunlight. But beneath lies the preserved past. Meat that waited, fish that traveled, sauces that defended distance. Status adds harmony, logistics write the theme. Palace reality sounds like barrels and lists. Salt by stone, spice by dram. Brine rinsed from fish by hands that won't wear rings. One more anchovy because the sauce wants bone-deep savor. Candied lemons dried where drafts are managed like politics. The high table's illusion rests on seawater and patience. They chew differently. They swallow the same truths. Manchet is a raft under traveled gravy. Rosy meat passed through brine's court. Sauced fish spoke river first. Tender vegetables arrived late from weathered markets. Shaven cheese was cellar arithmetic. Lavish sweets began in baths and reductions of keeping. 3 plates, sturgeon, larded and sauced, admiration, surprise, delight. Then clean salt and barrel's hint. A marchpane castle, almond under sugar, sweetness built on keeping. Oysters, vinegar, pepper, lemon or sorrel, present tense sea, least altered, best. Why does the sea persist? Because power is logistics with better candles. Estates stand far from coasts, but close to markets. Calendars legislate fish, barrels assure against distance and pride. Cooks are chemists, and chemistry has limits. Gold leaf doesn't season, tapestries don't flavor, trumpets don't tenderize. Midnight, off stage, a heel of white bread, cold salted beef, mustard,
2 capers, a quiet anchovy and butter. No trumpets. Beneath pepper and dignity, the faithful edge of the tide speaks again. And it is good.
The flame has folded itself into a small, well-mannered star. Spoons rest like quiet moons along a towel's horizon. The table has lost its hurry and kept its grace. What remains is the sort of comfort that travels without luggage, a hill of bread saved for a late return, a pot banked for tomorrow's certainty, a sprig hung high to remind winter what summer once said. If tonight's company set a little warmth to simmer in the pockets, send a soft signal back, tap like the modern knock on a friendly door. Let the bell mind the calendar so the next bowl arrives while water thinks about boiling. Subscribe and wander with this kitchen from market to ladle, from rafter to spoon. A small favor before the embers go to sleep. Leave a trace of when we shared the room. Write the time zone and the hour you listened. For example, Cest 2206. It draws a constellation of kitchens and trains and windows, proof that comfort crosses hours as easily as streets. Add a line of what the day tasted like where the night found it. Such notes salt the stew for those who come after. Until next time, keep vinegar within reach and patience within reason. Keep parsley for the end and opinions for later. Trust bread to forgive and kettles to remember. May morning find the knife honest, the cup near, the door untroubled, and the first light practicing kindness on the floorboards. When the bell suggests another chapter, come as you are. Work still on your sleeves, errands still in your shoes. There will be a place set, a bowl that knows your name, and steam spelling out the simple invitation that outlives recipes. Sit, breathe, eat while it's warm.